It begins with a late autumn wind sweeping across the Red River, pushing ripples across the cold, dark water beneath the Veterans Memorial Bridge. Police lights flicker against the surface, their colors breaking apart in the current as officers kneel at the bank. A body has been spotted tangled in the reeds, and the silence that follows the discovery feels too familiar. Another Indigenous woman has been found, and no one on scene wants to say it out loud, but everyone knows what this might mean. The river has carried secrets before, and tonight it brings another one to shore. The case draws immediate attention because it resembles others that have surfaced over the past decade. Families in Fargo, Moorhead, and the smaller towns along the river have been voicing concerns for years. Women from local Indigenous communities have been disappearing or turning up dead under circumstances that never seem to add up. Some are ruled accidental drownings. Others are dismissed as exposure or misadventure. But the families insist their daughters, sisters, and mothers did not simply wander into the frigid water. They point to patterns: missing clothing, signs of struggle, unexplained injuries, and investigations that move too slowly to catch their breath. The timeline begins in 2015, when the disappearance of a young Spirit Lake tribal member sends shockwaves across both states. She had been attending a party in Fargo, captured in a few blurry cell phone videos, laughing with friends. Witnesses remember seeing her leave on foot, planning to walk only a few blocks before catching a ride home. She never made it. Search parties combed the riverbanks and wooded areas, volunteers marking off ground with tape and flags. But days passed without answers. When her body was finally found downstream, the official explanation did not match what her family believed. They pushed for clarity, for a deeper look, but the case stalled. More disappearances followed. In 2017, another woman vanished after being last seen near downtown Fargo. Her family reported her missing almost immediately, but the initial search did not expand beyond a few city blocks. Weeks later, her remains were recovered miles downriver. Authorities cited hypothermia, but relatives said she had been terrified of the river and never walked near it alone. They pleaded with investigators to consider the possibility of foul play, but the conclusion remained unchanged. By 2019, frustration among Indigenous communities had reached a breaking point. Local advocates organized marches through Fargo and Moorhead, holding signs bearing the faces of missing women. They called for better coordination between tribal police, city departments, and state agencies, pointing out that jurisdictional confusion often left cases drifting between offices. When the Red River claimed yet another victim, a young mother from the Turtle Mountain Band, questions sharpened. Friends said she had reported being followed in the weeks before she disappeared. Her final text messages showed worry, not intoxication or confusion. But her death was again ruled accidental. Families learned to document everything themselves. They saved screenshots, tracked last known locations, and compared details from each case. They met in community centers, church basements, and living rooms, sharing timelines and observations in ways investigators had not attempted. Some mothers said their daughters' phones were found in places that made no geographical sense. Others said their loved ones were discovered missing shoes or jackets despite freezing temperatures. The similarities were too close to ignore. The tipping point came in 2021, when a college student from a nearby reservation disappeared after leaving a friend's apartment late at night. Security footage showed her walking steadily, hands in her pockets, heading toward a well-lit street that should have led her home. Instead, she vanished somewhere between the cameras. Her body was discovered weeks later in the river, and her family insisted she had no reason to be near the water. They had begged investigators to search immediately, but the earliest searches focused on abandoned lots and alleyways instead of the river's edge. Public pressure forced state officials to reopen several cases. Task forces were formed to review investigative lapses, and national attention began to settle on the region as part of the broader crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Community members attended every meeting, filling conference rooms with photographs and testimony. They demanded accountability for mistakes that had allowed critical hours to slip away. Some investigators acknowledged that early searches should have been more aggressive. Others admitted that communication between agencies had often broken down at key moments. The most haunting part of the pattern is that no single explanation ties the cases neatly together. Some families believe human trafficking may have played a role. Others think predators have learned how to exploit gaps in jurisdiction. A few fear someone may be targeting Indigenous women specifically, counting on indifference and slow response to cover their tracks. Investigators continue to say they have found no confirmed link between the deaths, but the families remain unconvinced. In 2023, a new search effort took shape after another young woman from the Red Lake Nation went missing while visiting Fargo. Her friends said she had stepped outside a bar to make a phone call and never returned. This time, volunteers mobilized within hours, sweeping the riverbanks in coordinated teams, refusing to wait for official guidance. When her remains were found days later, the grief felt overwhelming, but it also strengthened the resolve of those who had been fighting for years. They pushed harder for improved protocols, faster alerts, and direct collaboration between tribal authorities and local departments. Slowly, changes began to appear. Police agencies introduced new training focused on handling missing person cases involving Indigenous victims. Task forces expanded their outreach, meeting regularly with families and advocates. Some older cases were re-examined with fresh eyes, though many remained clouded by the loss of early evidence. Even with progress, the community understood that answers would not come quickly. The river had taken too many daughters, and patterns were too deeply ingrained to undo in a single year. Standing on the bank today, the water looks calm, but families who have spent nights searching its edges know better. They remember flashlights sweeping over mud and ice, the cold soaking through gloves as they combed through reeds and driftwood. They remember holding each other when another body was found. They remember sitting across from investigators, trying to explain that their daughters did not simply fall, wander, or give up. These were women with futures, with families, with plans that were cut short under circumstances no one can comfortably explain. The cases remain open in the eyes of the people who loved them. They continue to push, continue to demand transparency and urgency, refusing to let their daughters' names fade into paperwork. For them, the story of the Red River women is not a headline or a statistic, but an ongoing fight for truth in a place where too many answers lie beneath the surface. And until every question is addressed, every lead followed, and every case handled with the seriousness it deserves, they will not stop searching. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories, if you dare.